It's obvious that the times we are in require leadership that responds to crisis with clarity and with purpose. On the morning of April 15, 1912, the Titanic sank. It was a ship that was considered unsinkable. It had the latest technology of its day. It had been built with the intention that it would survive the hazards of the sea. And yet, it hit an iceberg, and within 2.5 hours, it was down on the ocean floor. Most of us would associate with the Titanic because of the movie that came out in 1997, and especially that Celine Dion's theme song, My Heart Goes On. But it wasn't as romantic as we saw it. It was a very painful moment for mankind. On that night, when the Titanic sank, it was not the only ship in the waters at that time. There were 3 ships, including the Titanic itself, and another ship called the Californian, and the Carpathia. These 3 ships were in the same vicinity, and they were piloted by 3 different captains. And in those 3 captains, we see leadership and how it responds to crisis. A crisis most of the time is very sudden. It's unpredictable. Sometimes you can see it coming. Other times it just hits you. It's very intense. It spirals. And if it's not well managed, it becomes a catastrophe or a disaster. It has been said that we are in a crisis in our country. That's a bit subjective based on who is saying what. But we can all say that all is not well. As Vikram clearly showed us, and showing us the folly of some of the undertakings we've committed ourselves to. The Titanic was built so well, and the captain of the Titanic was called Smith. He had had a brilliant career, never had any accident on the sea. He was chosen to lead and captain the Titanic on its maiden voyage when it set out from Southampton. And on it were great people, some of the wealthiest people of that time. They were so confident about their own projections about the ship. They believed in it. That they didn't take time to go through some of the routines that were required. The passengers should have been taught on how to use lifeboats. But who was going to teach on lifeboats if the boat was unsinkable? So they didn't do that. They hadn't gone through any drill. The sailors hadn't gone through any drill on how to manage an evacuation if it was necessary, because they believed it was unsinkable. And so when it hit the iceberg, first, it was a shock. Secondly, they believed that it was a very minor incident and would not have any major crisis for them. And so there was a delay in responding. But over time, the airtight areas at the bottom of the ship were broken in, water went into the ship, and started collapsing. Because they hadn't really planned on how to evacuate, they didn't know what to do. They had lifeboats, but some of the lifeboats were lowered with just about 12 passengers in them, and these were boats that should take 40 people. Boats that should take 60 people sometimes had 20 people in them. So there was a haphazard evacuation, and that led to massive loss of life. At the time that Titanic was sinking, there was another ship that was close to it, the Carpathia, the Californian. The Californian was very close, and the captain actually saw the lights of the Titanic. And when it started sinking, they started sending out signals, flash, whatever they call those things. The SOS signals they send out in the sea. And the captain of the Carpathia saw it, but thought that the Titanic couldn't sink, and if they were sending out those flares, it probably was a celebration. They were having a party. So they watched the flare. He didn't even wake up his signal man to find out whether there was a message coming through. And when they saw the Titanic sinking and the lights just going down, they assumed that the ship was moving away and did nothing. But at the same time, when the Titanic was sinking and sent its SOS, there was another ship that was farther away. And when the captain heard the message, he turned his ship around and started speeding straight to where the message had come from. And because there was a lot of iceberg in the ocean at that time, he put a lot of people at the bow to watch out for iceberg. But they went at full speed. And whilst he was going at full speed, he started arranging for all the emergencies that would be needed. Normally, in those days, the richest people were the English people. So first class normally had English people. So he sent an English doctor to the first class, an Italian doctor to second class, and there were no Africans. And a Hungarian doctor to the third class, because that's where the third class was. He prepared everything, prepared the ship, went through the drill of rescue, and so got his crew ready for the assignment. And all this was happening whilst he was traveling. He took 4 hours to get to where the Titanic was. By the time he got there, the ship had sunk for 2 hours. But he was able to rescue about 710 people, because there was a leader who responded quickly and knew what to do at that time. And in these three scenarios, you see three kinds of leaders that can emerge in a crisis. The first is the one who is overconfident, who believes his own story, that he is unsinkable, and continues telling himself that until he sinks. And you can see that leadership in our own lives, in our companies, in our businesses, in how we manage crisis. So we could take that route. Or there is a second kind of leader who is the overcautious one, who never knows what to do, and who is always hoping that things will be better. Best case scenario. And so when the ship is sinking, he thinks it's a party. Or there is a third kind of a leader who is decisive, who follows the rules, and who seizes the urgency of the moment. I believe that we need a new leadership response in our national life. We cannot continue partying, and we cannot assume that things will get better. We have to act intentionally, decisively, methodically. And if we do, at the national level, I think we can avert the disaster. But also as people who are players in our national life, whether as pastors, educators, finance people, we can't afford to be perplexed and so overwhelmed by what we hear, we see, that we become frozen in action and do nothing. I think one of the speakers was talking about a scenario of the city getting to 10 cities to the dollar. And I had people exclaim when that thought even came up. And much as I'm a pastor and I believe in God and I believe in the power of prayer and I believe that we can pray and things will turn around, the city has a very peculiar mind on its own. So it's almost like my first car. My first car had a mind of its own. It would decide whether to move or not to move. You could spark it and it wouldn't respond. You would move it and it will stop. Just stop. Just to embarrass you. So much as I wish that the city would remain where it is or improve in value, that scenario of 10 to 1 is a possibility. It is. I don't wish it, I don't want it, I don't pray for it, I don't hope for it, I don't expect it, but it can. And so instead of sitting here hoping that everything will be all right, I think it would be great for us to face reality that things could get worse. And if they do, what do we do? And I hope that with what we have heard today from all the speakers, we will avert our minds to some of these realities, that as much as we want to assume the best, the worst could be happening. So on a night of great tragedy where several hundred people died, we also saw a decisive leader who, although he arrived late on the scene, was able to pick up survivors and save people. We may not be able to save everything, but we should be able to save something. I have been a Ghanaian all my life. And since my childhood, I have never in my life seen prices go down in Ghana. I've never seen things go up and come down. It seems as if we are on a permanent trajectory of deterioration. When things go bad, they don't revert to normal. So I find it very difficult to see things getting back to normal based on my experience as a Ghanaian. So what do? I prepare for the West and hope that I can arrive on time to save some people or to provide some help somewhere. And since I'm not government, I don't control the economy. I only respond. And some people make those decisions and I respond. If they make good decisions, good for us. If they make bad decisions, I still have to respond. I still have to move my ship. I still have to move on and still try to rescue and save what I can save. I trust that we would be the third captain, that in spite of the dangers, and by the way, when the sun rose up that morning and the captain of the Carpathia looked back, he saw that although he had taken all the precautions, there were tons of icebergs that somehow his ship had missed. It was risky, but he moved. I just want to encourage all the business owners here. It may be choppy waters in the future. It may be very choppy. There may be a lot of icebergs, and you may probably see businesses collapse around you. But you still have to move. You can't get stuck there in indecision. You have to move. You still have to be decisive. And at this event, we've received quite some interesting ideas that we can work with. Some of them we can work with, some of them we may not be able to work with, but we still have to move. We still have to be decisive. We still have to take some of the bold steps we need to take. I pray that God helps us as a nation to rise to the occasion, and that even among the business community we would have leaders who really respond decisively and are able to redeem the situation that we are confronted with. I haven't given you a lot to be happy about, and that's not my job. I have just let you know that we are in this ocean and our ship is going down. And we can't pretend it's a party on board our ship. And I hope the captains of the ship don't behave like the captain of the first Titanic, who was so overconfident that he allowed thousands of people to die just because he wasn't prepared for the crisis.